What's up, Unbroken Nation? Hope that you're doing well wherever you are in the world today. I'm very excited to be back with you with another episode with my friend Nikole Mitchell, famously known as the pastor turned stripper. Cole, my friend, I'm so excited to have you here. And I know that intro is probably people like, what the fuck are they talking about? And the reason I wanted to have you on the show, one, is I know you, you're my friend, you're my homie. We've spent time together, broken bread. I've gotten to know you, and your story is just incredible. And I was thinking about it when I invited you onto the show. I was like, people need to understand the power of controlling your identity. And I was like, I don't know anyone better than you to have this conversation. And so with that, I welcome you, my friend. How are you? What is happening in your world today?
What's up? Oh my gosh, Michael, I'm so happy to be here. This is going to be the most fun and deep conversation. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's my absolute pleasure. Truly, it is an honor. For those who do not know you, tell us a little about your story, your journey, and how you got to where you are today.
Yes. So I've gone viral as the pastor turned stripper. I've gone viral as being known for going from food stamps to seven figures. I grew up really religious, really conservative, um, picked up on messaging at a really young age of what it meant to be a good girl. And a good girl stayed small. A good girl sacrificed her own wants for the sake of others. A good girl stayed behind the scene. All the women in my churches and communities were either in the kitchen or in the nursery, and all the leaders and teachers and powerful people were all men. And so while it wasn't explicitly told, Nikole, you stay in the nursery or kitchen, I saw it. I saw it lived out. And that's the messaging I took was like, oh, I know where I belong. I stay small and I do everything behind the scenes to make the men shine. And I tried so hard to be that good girl. I tried to fit that mold with everything in me. And up until my mid-20s even, and I went to my first church ever that allowed women to be pastors. And I can't believe I'm saying this in the 21st century. Like, how is this still a thing? Like, women are fucking equal to men. I don't know how that's still being argued. But it was like liberating for me. I saw women in positions of power. I saw women in leadership. And as a natural leader, I felt this thing I'd like stuffed down and clamped down, like come alive. And I was like, oh, that's me. I'm a fucking leader, and, like, I can speak on stages and talk to thousands and lead and, like, inspire people. And so I, became a pastor there, one of many pastors, and it was a big mega church. And in many ways, it freed me. But as the higher I rose up, the more I felt snuffed out. They didn't want me to be me. They wanted me to be a version of the main head pastor. And as I'm rising up in ranks, I'm jumping through more hoops, and I'm compromising who I am more and more and more to please people in leadership. I'm like, why am I doing this? Like, why am I being paid scraps to be someone that's not even me? This doesn't make sense. It goes against everything they say. What they say was different from what they taught or what they embodied. And so in 2017, I was really disillusioned with the church. I was sick of being broke. We were on food stamps for 8 years. I was married then. We had three little kids. It was so frustrating. It was so exhausting. I was doing all the right things I was taught to do, and I was broke and miserable. And so I decided to just walk away from it all and figure out, who is Nikole really? When I'm away from all the indoctrination and all of the standards and expectations others put on me, who am I really? What do I want? Who do I want to be? What's the life I want to live? And so I left everything in 2017. I was like Elsa and Frozen. I like left the known for the unknown, followed the call that's in my heart. And it was terrifying because I had no idea where it was going to lead me, much less to where I am today, where a full time adult content creator. I'm a life coach. I just crossed my first million a few months ago in my business. And it was all because I was willing to leave everything I once was for the sake of finding who I really am.
Hey, what's up, my friend? We'll be right back to the show. But I wanted to let you know about a brand new feature we are adding to the Think Unbroken podcast, where I'm going to be answering your questions. That's right. If you have a question about healing, trauma, overcoming, or becoming the hero of your own story, all you need to do is go to thinkunbrokenpodcast.com and click Ask Michael a Question, where you'll be able to leave up to a 2-minute voice note for me to answer any question about anything you have about life, your journey, and healing. So head over to thinkunbrokenpodcast.com, click Ask Michael a Question, and I will answer your question on a future episode of the Think Unbroken podcast. And until then, my friend, be unbroken.
It's incredible. And I relate to so much of that. You know, it's funny actually, this past weekend I was in Salt Lake City with one of my very close friends. And everyone on this show knows I grew up in a hyper abusive Mormon household. And I actually removed myself from the church and its indoctrination when I was 12. And look, context, I always have to say this. I'm not defaming or belittling church or God or religion. You do you. But for me, that didn't make sense. And for a long time, it held over my head. It was like always there, always stopping me. I used to have panic attacks when I would go by a church or if somebody would invite me. And I was like, this is really weird. So it took a lot of healing to get through the religious trauma aspects of this. And in Salt Lake City this weekend, being around a church on every corner like fucking Starbucks, I was having a conversation with my friend. I was like, oh, it's incredible the amount of healing I've done against this religious trauma because I'm not impacted by this at all. You know, you see all these guys walking around with their name tags and the girls in their dresses, and you're like, yeah, do you. So again, that's not about a thing of being offensive to anyone. It's just simply to say, like, there are times in your life where you have to question everything, because without questioning everything, I think that kind of takes away free will. And when we sit in the indoctrination of really so much dogma that is handed down from us generation to generation, we get trapped in it. Even today, I was listening to a podcast and someone said something that was just fascinating. Neo Davis, if you know who Neo is, he was on Dan Henry's show. And what he said was that this idea that we have been trapped in an education system that has led us to this place where we just simply have to be what they tell us. But entrepreneurship and trusting and believing yourself is kind of like the ultimate pushback against that. And I was thinking about that getting ready for this conversation with you. And I was like, that's literally both your life and my life simultaneously and independent. I want to go back and start this really in this place, thinking about this idea of leadership. And I want to start there because you said, I feel like I was a leader. I was a leader, but I wasn't getting my stage, my opportunity to be myself. You even mentioned like they wanted you to be a carbon copy of this other pastor. When did leadership become evident in your life? Why has it held true for you? And how have you been able to leverage and use your words to be an effective leader?
That's a good question, Michael. I feel like I became first aware of it in high school. I noticed I had this ability to take people from very different cliques in my high school, and we could hang out because I was there. I was like this person who bridged the gap. And then if I was sick or out from school, those people would have nothing to do with each other. And then when I come back to school, they'd be like, oh my God, thank God you're back. I could not stand so and so when you were gone. But then when I was there, we could all hang out, have an amazing time. And I thought that's so interesting. When I'm around, people are able to gather and congregate, connect, and converse. But when I'm gone, they can't stand each other. And I realized this influence I had. And so I try to channel that in my youth group. Like I try to be a leader as much as a woman was allowed to be, or a young woman was allowed to be, but I still very capped. So I tried to work within these really strict confines. I could share my story to the group, but I'm not allowed to teach. I can speak in front of my fellow peers, but I'm not allowed to preach. It was like so many technicalities and so much legalism. And I'd always try to wiggle my way around. Even in Bible college, I I knew I was meant to speak on stages. And so I'd say, I'm going to be a motivational speaker. So I'm not allowed to say I want to be a preacher. I want to be a pastor. I want to be a teacher. That's not allowed. But if I say motivational speaker, some audiences will let me speak to men and women. So I kept trying to find the way to fit the appropriate spot that people had available for someone like me. And even at that mega church, I was like a leader, but still just they were trying to make me a carbon copy. And at some point I said, am I going to keep trying to be who they need me to be? Or am I willing to step out into the unknown and become all that I'm able to be without the confines? And it's terrifying, but it's also thrilling because you actually have a shot at creating life on your terms when you're no longer trying to live by someone else's.
Yeah, that's so true. And I heard you think about this for a moment. Like all of the greatest people in sports, they all have one thing in common. All of the greatest people in leadership, they all have one thing in common. All the greatest people in business, they all have one thing in common. And that's that you always hear this old adage about this idea that belief is everything.
Mm.
And I think so often, and especially in dogmatic environments, belief is stripped of you. How are
Mm.
you in this time? Because, here's what I think is really fascinating about your story is you're in this position of trying to make the world a better place in the way that you see fit, while also simultaneously kind of trapped in this system and fighting against it to share your voice and your message while simultaneously being on fucking food stamps. How, like, what is happening in your life in this moment where you're like, I'm gonna trust myself and go for this anyway? Because a lot of people will hear that and be like, man, that's rock bottom, like, why bother? And I hear that and I'm like, that's the perfect time to shift.
Mm. Yeah, I think for those of us who are born for greatness, we know it at a very young age. I remember being in late elementary school, early middle school, pretending to do TV commercials in front of my hallway mirror because I knew I was meant to be famous. And like, I felt that way, I'd act that way. But once the word got out to my friends and close friends, everyone laughed. Like, they saw it as vain, as shallow, selfish, silly to want to be famous. And so I quickly snuffed that dream down and hid it. And then later, but it's always there. We always know when we're meant for more. And it's not for everyone. And that's the thing is like, you have to figure out for yourself, is greatness meant for you? Do you want to go to the next level? Do you believe more is available for you? Because if you do, it is. If you don't, it's not. Like, we get to create the realities we want to live in. And so once I started to surround myself with people who were living out their power and potential, I saw representation. When I saw women online making a lot of money, I was like, oh shit, does that mean I can make a lot of money online too? So I look for people who emulated the life that I wanted to have. And the more I surrounded myself with them, the more I listened to the way they talked about themselves, the way they believed in themselves. It started to be almost like an infusion of their belief into me, of my own self belief. And I was like, if they can do it, surely Nikole can do it too.
Yeah. And in my experience, going through a very similar process, it was, well, I've got to actually convince myself that I believe it. What was that journey like for you?
Yeah. I always tell my clients, it's not about convincing others. It's about convincing yourself because once you're convinced, others will become convinced. Once you believe, others will believe. As within, so without. Our external is always a reflection of our internal. So our biggest and the hardest and most important work we can do is all the stuff inside of here, in our heart, in our mind, the stories we tell, the beliefs we hold, the possibilities or the limits we place on ourselves. So much of my coaching support is like doing the internal work because once we clear stuff up in here, we clear stuff up out here. And so it was a journey to step into believing that I was worthy of more because I was taught by religion I was deserving of hell. I deserved nothing but garbage, scraps. And then I found these other people who believed we are inherently good, that we are inherently whole, that we actually do deserve all the good. And that was such a foreign concept to me that it took me a lot of reprogramming of believing that Nikole Mitchell is inherently worthy of good things, that I deserve not just crumbs, I deserve the whole damn buffet. And once I could like start to replace these really unhelpful and harmful stories with better and truer ones, I felt the shift. I felt from me like kind of cowering and contracting to like expansive and powerful. I went from like tolerating a lot of shit to like having such a low tolerance for bullshit. Like once those beliefs changed, my energy changed, my body changed, my decisions changed, but it had to start in here. No one could do that work for me. I had to do it myself.
Yeah, and that's the part that I wish, it doesn't matter how many coaches you have, how many podcasts you listen to, how many books you read, like it really is about that transformation within yourself that's going to
Mhm.
lead you to that place. In that, what was the greatest thing that you discovered about who you are?
That I am really as powerful as I feel I am. It makes me think of that Marianne Williamson quote, which I'm totally going to botch, but where she says, it's not like our smallness that scares us, it's our greatness that scares us, that we are actually as powerful as we feel ourselves to be. And I remember reading that quote like 4 or 5 years ago, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's it. I feel immensely powerful. I'm kind of terrified of the change I will create in my life and in the world if I fully step into and own it. And now that I'm here, as I've shifted from food stamps to my first $1 million, as I went from good girl to free woman, I have so much evidence of holy shit, I really am that powerful. And I know I've just begun. I've only begun to tap into my power and potential. And I am now tickled, delighted, thrilled to see what I'm going to create over the next few years and across my lifetime.
I relate to that a lot. You know, when I was young, and I've said this 8,000 times on the show, I just wanted to be in the Foo Fighters or Jay-Z. I wanted to be a rock star.
Oh
That's
my
it.
God.
And,
Yes.
and you know, it's funny because to some extent in my head I am, because I'm like on these big stages with the microphone, moving audiences to tears, right? I mean, obviously you've seen me speak, and that's like this really crazy thing. But when I was young, it was very much kind of that thing like you, where I'm like practicing in the mirror, and then I'll like practice, do all these things. And it was interesting because the more and more people would hear about my dreams as a kid, I distinctly remember this, the more that they would shit on and be like, you're never gonna do that.
Mhm.
And we are the sum total of all of our experiences leading to this moment. And to be dismissive of that is dangerous. And so it's slowly implanted in your head time and again. Don't think so big. Don't want so much. Be happy with what you have. Be satisfied. Enjoy the crumbs because at least you fucking got them. And I always felt like, no, that doesn't make sense to me, because why can those people have it? Like I distinctly remember the show. Oh my God, what was it called? Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. I would watch that show with Robin Leach, and he'd be like, "These are the houses of billionaires and trillionaires and the finest elites of the world, and like their lunch costs more money than people I knew would make in an entire year." And I could sit in the living room and watch that show with my grandma, and she'd be like, "Well, don't get your hopes up." And I'm like, that's a really, really poor way to look at the fucking world, because you can have anything. When you're in this shift and you're starting to realize, like, wait a second, in your words, I can have the buffet. What were the things that were actually happening that was reinforcing that belief?
Oh my gosh. I'm so glad you gave that example of watching Lifestyles of Rich and Famous and the comment your grandma made, because that's how we get programmed. Without even realizing we're being programmed as kids, these little things that our family or friends or people in society say. My dad was the same way, where it's just like, to be rich is to be gross. To be rich is to be ungrateful and greedy. So when I decided to become rich, I had a lot of deprogramming, a lot of unlearning about what that meant. Because I couldn't even say the word rich. I would cringe when I'd say I want to be rich, as if that was inherently wrong. Right. So I had to go back and neutralize those stories and realize wealth is neutral, money is neutral. It doesn't change you, it amplifies who you really are. So if you're greedy, you just have more to be greedy with. If you're generous, you have more to be generous with. And I know that I'm a generous and good-hearted person. So if money belongs to anyone, it belongs to me. And so I'd go through and like take these like memories like you that I had throughout childhood and then flip the script, right? Instead, like, don't get your hopes up. Instead, I imagine my grandma saying to me, girl, that's going to be you. And like retelling the story where it infused me with belief, infused me with power, infused me with hope versus feeling crapped on and small and silly for having these desires to be rich and famous, which is exactly what I've always wanted to be. And to finally have a taste of it in my current life feels so good, because I feel like my outsides match my inside. My insides have always known what I've wanted. My external circumstances just never reflected it back to me. It reminds me of Lady Gaga when she like first went viral and was becoming famous, and she was being interviewed, and they said, "How does it feel to be famous?" And she said, "Oh, I've always been famous. You're just now catching on." And I was like, "Yes, that's it." Like those of us who know we're meant to be great, successful, famous, wealthy, rich beyond reason, whatever I think, we know. We know from such an early age, and we have all these people around of us who don't want us to get hurt, who don't want us to be disappointed. So they crap on our dreams and our desires to try to keep us safe, but trying to keep us safe keeps us small. And in order to go big, you have to take risks. You have to make unsafe decisions, right? You have to invest in yourself at amounts you never thought you would ever do to create the lifestyle, the business, the income of your dreams. And so thank you for sharing that. And I feel like that's where the work happens. Are you willing to take these stories and scripts that are passed down to you, flip it on its head, and then use that to infuse you to become the most expansive, wealthiest, successful version of yourself?
Yeah, 100%. And y- I like the idea of unsafe, calculated decisions. You know, because when I first started my photography business when I was like 12 years ago or something crazy now, it was a really unsafe, uncalculated decision, which cost me everything. And I learned I learned a lot of lessons the really hard way doing that. And in that I think that, I mean, just the human experience. I don't know about you, but I tend to learn the hard way. You could sit here all fucking day long and be like, don't do that, don't do that, try this, do that. I've seen this work. And it's like, there is some truth to the idea of modeling, right? Model, mimic, master. Brendan Dawson taught me that. But there's also something, and it might just be me, where I'm just like, man, if I don't put my finger in the fucking electrical socket, I'm just never gonna know. And so, and so I'm wondering, as you step into that power and that place, when you're going through and you're learning lessons the hard way, right? When you're like, fuck, I failed, I messed up, I made a mistake, I did this thing I shouldn't have done. And I'm not in your head, so I don't know this to be true, but when I do that for a millisecond, my brain goes, ah, see, this is why you should have not done the thing to begin with. And it goes, just go do the safe thing, revert, go back. And now I've learned how to squelch that incredibly quickly. It doesn't impact me. But I'm curious, when you face those moments, how do you talk to yourself? What is the language you use, and how do you navigate that?
Oh my gosh, those moments totally happened for me, which is pretty crazy because I've been doing this now for 4 years and I've obviously created like incredible results. I have enough evidence to last me a lifetime. If I created nothing beyond this moment, I have enough evidence to last me a lifetime that I can have the power to create any reality I want. I can change anything I want about my life. I can achieve anything I want. But we still have that very human side. We still have like that inner child inside of us that has old fears and old programming that still crops up. So my latest example of that actually, Michael, is this past year was the first year I've paid quarterly taxes. And because I've never owed money. The government has always owed me money at tax season because that's how broke I was for 9 years in a row. And then when my business started making money, I owed like baby taxes. It was really cute. I was actually excited to pay taxes because like the first time ever, and it was such little amounts. I'm like, oh my God, look at me, I'm a big girl. And so then this past year, I was making so much money that I started paying quarterly taxes and I felt so responsible. I felt savvy. I felt successful. Like I'm an accomplished, wealthy person. Like I'm on top of it. But because of situations, things that happen, tax season comes and I'm slammed with 6 figures more in taxes. Right. And it was just like, wait, I've been paying all this money all year long. Here I'm thinking I'm going to get to the end of the year and it's nothing. I'm neutral. It's good. I can continue to make profit. And now they need 6 figures from me and it's going to wipe me on my bank account. And I'm just like, wait a second. And it triggered me enough to freak out. This old programming that says, well, see, just as soon as it gets good, something shitty happens, or you can't trust that the good will always last. Good never lasts. And little Nikole was like freaking out and I was like, would it be better to make a little less money so I don't get slammed with these big taxes? That was a very real thought that went through my head. And I cried. Yes, especially when you know you're meant for greatness. And it's like, well, and you have the old tapes of like, don't be ungrateful from family or like, don't be greedy. It's like, well, maybe this is good enough. Maybe this level is where I should stop because if I'm already scared of what I'm getting slammed with now, what on earth is going to happen when I'm making multi millions? Like, and I had to do a lot of internal work and like journaling and get support from my coaching and leaning into my foundation and my identity as someone who has wealth beyond imagination, wealth beyond reason, more money than she knows to do with. And I realized, no, this is not where I'm meant to stop. I've only barely started. And so I leaned in and decided I'm going to keep leveling up. I can manage this big surprise of taxes and I'm going to just generate more and more money. But it brought up so much fear that it was a hiccup for a good couple of weeks where I was like pretty freaked out, probably a month of freaking out, which is not typical for Nikole. I freak out and I get back into my power really fast. This was big enough and unexpected enough that it threw me off for a while and I got scared of like, am I going to go back now? Or am I going to lean in? And I chose to lean in. I think that's what the really successful do. When it's easy, it's easy. When it's hard, who are you in that moment? Are you actually little Nikole where you think like you're getting away with being successful, but it's actually all a fluke? Or are you actually this massively successful, wealthy person on the inside who knows more, is even more in store for her? And so you're going to lean in and keep fucking going. And I decided to keep fucking going.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And that's the testament, right? And for me, I can tell you, like, I probably could not say that I have a similar moment or experience or outcomes without the coaching and the therapy and the journaling and the meditation and just reinstilling a new program. Like I believe we live in the matrix, probably not actually, but you know, how would you know? And I always think about this idea, like you have the power to really bend the world to you, right? There's a scene at the end where the agents are shooting Neo against the wall. It's one of the last scenes of the film, and he's dead for a split second. And then what happens is he actually believes that he's the one, and he stands up and he pulls the bullets out of himself, and then they shoot him again, and he pauses them in midair, and he looks at him and drops them, and he goes, "Wait, I control this." And that's life. Like that truly is life. And as you were speaking, I had two thoughts. One, I remember the moments, especially in my early 20s, where before I was working for the Fortune 10 company and making real money, where I'd be like, God, I can't wait till tax time. I need that $1,800 more than I need
Yes.
fucking air.
Yeah.
And realizing how limited that is. So that's one. And I'm really glad I don't think that way anymore. And I wish more people wouldn't. I understand the struggle. I've been there. I was homeless as a fucking kid. So like I get it. But two, Grant Cardone told me something after he invested in Think Unbroken and became a business partner. He said, "You're thinking too small." And
Mm.
as you were talking, the thing I was thinking, Nikole, was like, you should be worried about getting $10 million in taxes due, not six
Yep.
figures.
Yes.
And to me, that's not about fame and celebrity and riches, but it's like, are you going as big as you can? Are you
Yeah.
really fucking showing up as hard as you can, as living the life as much as you can? But it's that reprogramming process and the belief of self that ultimately leads to that place where you can have that. Because like I don't have $100 million, but it's like on the docket. Why? Because if you make more, you can give more. And if you give more, you can create change in the world. And ultimately, entrepreneurs are the people who are going to change the world. These corporations don't give a fuck about you. The government doesn't give a fuck about you. Your job does not care. I promise if you get fired, they will replace you so fast. It will make your head spin. And I look, again, entrepreneurship's not for everyone. I think entrepreneurship is really beautiful. Becoming a leader in a corporation for something you believe in is incredible. Many, many friends who are on that path. But I think for some people, if you're in this place in life where you're like, I believe that I am supposed to do this thing, and the job, the career, the boyfriend, girlfriend, the situation you're in, the city, the car, you like, all the things in your life are stopping you. Like, I really think you need to ask yourself some hard questions, which then leads to my next question. As you've progressed, like I'm going to rewind this. You're in this, you're looking at life, fucking food stamps came in, you're in the grocery store. I know the power of how uncomfortable, and I won't put the word embarrassing in your mouth, but for me, it was embarrassing to have to go and do that. And then have this, for lack of a better term, in context of this conversation, coming to Jesus moment and asking myself a really hard question. And so what I'm curious about in that moment, like that split second before the shift, what was the question that you were asking yourself?
Oh, yeah, I think it was, is this it? Is this it? Is this all life has to offer me? This is all I'm capable of becoming? And you're right. I was very embarrassed by my food stamps because I had a couple different food stamps, and one of them were vouchers. And you were only allowed to buy specific brands of specific measurements and specific sizes for you to check out. So I do my best. So it takes 3 times as long to pick out your groceries. And then you get to check out and be like, oh, this is the wrong brand or the wrong size or the wrong weight. Go back. And so and everyone in line behind you sees your white vouchers. So everyone knows you're on food stamps, and then everyone's waiting. The line would always get so clogged behind me because I'm running back and forth. I accidentally grabbed 5 bananas. You're only allowed 4 bananas. It was so demoralizing. And I'd finish this. I'm like, what am I doing with my life? And the turning point, I mean, there's many different turning points, but one of the turning points for me is for when I was on food stamps for 9 years, for the last 5 of those years, we were working harder and longer hours and making less money. Like you couldn't make that up. I'm like, is this a sick joke? Is this the fucking matrix? Like, how can I be working harder and longer and making less money? And so that's when I realized there's got to be more to money than just physical dollar bills. There's got to be more to money than what Dave Ramsey is teaching. Like and that's when I learned about like the energetic side of money. And that's when I started studying the inner world versus the outer world and your mind versus matter. And like, as I dove into wealth energetics, which is actually a program I'm starting next week because it changed my life, everything shifted. And I realized I was looking at money completely wrong. My mindset was completely off. And I realized it was my mindset, my beliefs that was creating my reality, which means I can change my mindset and my beliefs to change my reality. And that was a turning point. Like, this has got to be a joke. There's got to be a better way. And I found a better way.
Hey, what's up, Unbroken Nation? We'll be right back to today's episode, but I want to take a moment and invite you to Think Unbroken Conference. That's right. Our next conference is happening right around the corner this December with amazing speakers from around the world who are leaders in personal development, trauma education, mindset, and more. All you have to do to register to watch for free, that's right, $0. Come and join us, is go to myunbrokenlife.com, register and sign up. You can get access to the free event. Watch live with us this December. It'll be myself speaking along with amazing human beings like Anthony Trucks, Jamie Bronstein, Leslie Logan, and a special interview that I'm doing with Dr. Gabor Mate that has never before been released. So come and join us, myunbrokenlife.com. All you have to do is put in your email. We'll send you over the registration. You'll be able to come and join us, watch live. And then if you want access to the recordings or more information there for you to keep them forever. But in the meantime, go sign up. Block it off on your calendar. This is going to be a transformational experience that you do not want to miss. Head over to myunbrokenlife.com to register for free. Until next time, be unbroken. You know, what's really funny is so many people, let me rephrase it like this. In the world that we live in personal development and personal growth and coaching and all the things, because you and I are on a very similar path, people or in our world use the word mindset all the time. I use it all the time. You use it all the time. Everybody uses it all the time. And a lot of times people are like, can you just get to the content? Will you just teach me what I'm supposed to learn? And it's like, well, if your mindset's not fucking right, this is not going to matter because you're going to immediately try to debunk it. You're going to try to rationalize yourself out of it. You'll try to make meaning of why you can't have it. Like, people will make meaning of anything. They will always find a way to justify the things that happen. For money specifically, because I think it matters, and it matters probably now more than ever. We're obviously about to be in the biggest global recession in the history of the world. Bananas are $97 a pound now. Like, it's gonna get worse before it gets better. And I think everybody needs to understand that. And I've been constantly thinking about this idea. It's not about, I wish prices would go down. It's about, how do I make more revenue? How do I make more income? How do I build myself up more? Because when you're trapped in that small mindset of, okay, I got a budget, and look, of course you have to budget. I budget, we run businesses, there's always money involved. Like, you have to be smart, but it's about, can I put myself in a position to learn, to allow myself the space to welcome in more abundance? Another word fucking thrown around in this industry like hotcakes, but it's true. And so I'm curious, like, what are you excited about right now in terms of your reaction? And B, like, what was the major shift you had about money?
Oh my God. I'm so excited. I can talk about money all the live long day. I'm like obviously obsessed with it because of everything you just said. Once I realized my mindset was creating my reality, I realized that I had all the power. I kept waiting for my circumstances to change. I kept waiting to win the lottery, though I never bought a ticket for it. I kept waiting for my I kept waiting for my rich relative to die and give me the money if I didn't have rich relatives. We like think crazy, irrational thoughts as humans. And that's what we have to master our mindset, because I literally thought I could win the lottery someday. That'd be the dream. But did I ever buy a lottery ticket? No, like, who am I kidding? But that actually was a real thought in my brain for years. I can't wait to win the lottery someday. It's going to be the thing that saves me. Like, it's irrational. So if I'm willing to like go that extreme on my brain and my thoughts, surely I can actually channel that into actually helpful thoughts. And then I got so excited when you talk about budgeting, because budgeting makes me want to vomit. I hate the word budget. I'm in the process of brainstorming with my Become a Money Magnet course students, a new word for it, because it has the energy of limitation. for so many people, right? And as a very free and flowy and fluid human, traditional budgeting doesn't work for me. And I don't want a traditional budget because a traditional budget gives you a traditional life. I want an unconventional life. So I'm going to have an unconventional budget. This was the shift that changed things for me financially. A traditional budget is you look at how much you're making, you look at your expenses, you typically feel crabby about your expenses because so many of us overspend in what we make. And now you have to look where to contract. I got to take less over here and spend less over there. And it's all lack energy. Versus when I do the opposite. I look at my income, I look at my expenses, and I look at how much more money do I need to make each month to add breathing room to feel really good. And I did this when I was on food stamps. When I did this, I was like, I actually need an extra $2,000 per month to actually be able to pay all our bills and have a little bit left over. To make an extra $2,000 back then, you could have told me that was 2 million. That's how big it felt. It felt big and scary and impossible, but at least I had a number to start with. So instead of focusing on how to contract and subtract and spend less, it was like, how can I become become a match for more? How can I make more? So I went all from this energy from contraction to creativity. And I started brainstorming, thinking bigger and driving as though I just made an extra $2,000, shopping as though I made an extra $2,000. And my whole energy, body, mind, lived experience changed doing budgeting that way. Now I went on to like make $2,000 a month. Now I average $2,000 a day, which still blows my mind because that wasn't even a concept in my mind back then. I just wanted an extra $2,000 a month. So that's where we have to shift from traditional decisions because you're going to get a traditional life. If you want an unconventional life, you typically have to make unconventional decisions. So instead of focusing on how do I pay my bills, I focus on how can I create more? How can I be a match for more? How can I generate more? And that's when all the possibilities open up to us.
Yeah, I love that. And it is energetic because I think in the same way when you think about relationships or success, the car you drive, the kind of career you have, everything, everything comes down to what you believe you deserve. And we historically as human beings will tolerate a lot. And unfortunately, you're always going to get what you tolerate from yourself. And the hard part, look, I'll trace it back. I distinctly remember, being in at 25 years old, I'm 350 pounds, I'm rock bottom. I'm making, I probably wasted $1 million, literally. I'm brutally in debt. Everything's a nightmare because I was living the exact life that everyone told me. And I've talked about my mirror moment on this show many times where I looked at myself and I was like, everything is different. And it made me think about this client that I was working with recently as we were going through coaching. And he came to me and he's like, I am trapped every single day by the fear of being who I want to be. And I asked him a question. I said, what do you think's going to happen when you die? He goes, I think that I'm going to wish that I would have lived my life. And I go, well, maybe it's fucking time, huh? And I think that's one of the hardest things that we do, because in my moment of that, it was, I literally had to, and this is where I'm leading, and I don't know if this is true for you, I had to literally force myself into the life I live today.
Yeah.
How much of this, because motherfuckers are out here like, I read The Secret, nothing's different. Yeah, no shit. I'm wondering, what was the process for you of actually creating this?
Yeah. I love that. And that resonates with me because it was back when I was on food stamps. I read this article called The Top 10 Regrets of the Dying. And one of the top 10, two of them was they wish they had been like lived their truth, was actually who they really were, not who the others needed them to be. And they wish they had actually gone after their dreams. And I read that and I was like, those are two regrets I will not have at the end of my life. Like it gave me this fire of like, I want to live my authentic truth now. And I want to go all in on my dreams. I do not want to die with with those regrets. And so finding things that infuse you to go after it is so important. So whether it's personal development books, journaling, listening to this podcast, whatever your channel is for inspiration, keep feeding yourself because it's so easy to stop. It's so easy to sabotage. It's so easy to quit. But if you know you're meant for more and you're meant for greatness, you have to fuel your self-belief. So for me, it was me learning to not rely on others to save me. So I was relying on my church to save me financially with a job, with opportunities. I was so afraid to walk away because they were all my connections to mega church. They had a ton of connections to other churches and conferences. And if I left my church, I was leaving all those connections. But I had to focus on not just what I was losing, but I was gaining. I was gaining peace. I was gaining my own permission to stay, do, wear whatever the fuck I wanted and not have to get approval by anyone else. I had permission to start my own business if I so chose to, pick my own prices. So I leaned into what would it look like for me to create money on my terms? What would it look like for me to create success or sex on my terms? What would that look like? And I gave myself permission to dream and imagine. And I think I've always known I've wanted to be like do my own thing. I didn't have the word entrepreneur in my vocabulary back then, but I wanted to be an entrepreneur and create a life based on my terms. And so I decided, well, if no one's going to give me the job of my dreams, I might as well create my own fucking job. And that's when I started my life coaching business and began to put a number to something I naturally did well. This is what I help people realize. You're already doing something so amazingly and brilliantly and naturally, and you're just not making money on it because you typically aren't seeing it from a business framework. You're just like, oh, it's so easy for me. Who would ever pay me for this? Or anyone can do this. Like, I could never charge for this. If I make money doing what I love, isn't going to make me hate it. And it's like, no, learning how to monetize your shit. I literally have a program called Monetize Your Shit. When you learn how to monetize who you are, and what you do so naturally, it is the easiest way to make money and it makes it more fun. I already loved life coaching. I realized I was coaching people for years for fucking free. You know how much more I love it getting paid for it? I still do what I love. I'm just making bank while I'm doing it. So figure out like what is it that you naturally do well, you enjoy doing, you feel like you can do it all day long. Now let's put a number to it. And back when I started, I wanted to sell a $10,000 coaching package. But energetically, there's no way I had the confidence to sell that. All I could do at that time was sell a coaching package for a month of support for me for $250. People now pay me $50,000 to work with me one on one. Totally different spot, but I had to start where I could actually begin. So pick a number, even if it's tiny, 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 because once you do there, you can grow it. So my first month I charged $250, loved it so much, did it so well. The next month I doubled it to $500, crushed it with my clients, doubled it the next month to $1,000. After that, I charged $3,000 and I just slowly raised my rates as I got more experience. I got more confident. I got more rating testimonials. But it starts with you dreaming and giving yourself permission to create something of your own.
Yeah, and being willing to be okay. Like it's so fascinating to me the human psychology around the idea that we should just give everything to everybody. And like we hear this adage all the time, those who don't pay attention, and it's so true. I probably have 8,000 free courses I've signed up for downloaded on my computer. I'm never going to do anything with them, but I can promise you this: when I paid my coach 50 grand, I promise you I showed up. Right.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and what that is, and also like I can rewind to like 250, right, paying $100 for a session, like whatever. And it's scary, especially in the beginning. But it's in doing that that you find out what you're actually really made of. And it
Yeah.
may not be entrepreneurship for you, right? And that's totally fine. Like you, but also think about this. You're working at, the grocery store, you're working at the gas station, you're working at these minimum wage jobs because you have decided and that's not to say these positions don't matter and there's not import of those in the world, because it's certainly true. But you have to ask yourself, like, Nikole, your question, like, is this all? Is this all there
Mhm.
is? Because if
Mhm.
the answer is no, it is your responsibility to do something about it. But
Yeah.
you have to be willing to face the fear of figuring out who you are in that process and owning it. And I look, I'm gonna be remiss if I don't ask the question, because people are probably like, okay, you hit us with this giant opener, you haven't gotten to this thing, like what is going on? How do you transition into the authenticity of owning who you are and your truth to step into your sexuality in a way that has benefited you for the positive?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Well, I love talking about money and sex. So perfect segue and talking about my two favorite things. But real quick, I want to say something in regards to what you just said. It is not your fault for what's happened to you. It is your responsibility, however, to heal that shit, right? Not your fault for where you're born and what people did to you, but it is your responsibility to heal it so you can rise the fuck up. So, I've always been a very sexual person. And because of my upbringing, I learned very quickly that wanting to be a stripper in middle school was not acceptable. I was so excited. I was so free. I was free in my body, free in my sexuality until I was taught to not to be free. When I was still free with it, I mentioned it to some friends like, oh my God, doesn't like everyone want to be a stripper? Wouldn't that be amazing to dance on like a pool or on bar tops? And the looks I got, I realized, oh, I'm not allowed to say that. And so I learned from a very young age to snuff it all down inside of me, to not let anyone know about my sexuality and how much I yearned to be a performer almost my entire life. And then it was like my mid 30s where I left everything in 2017. And I was like, I'm just going to trust the call in my heart that somehow it's going to lead me somewhere, though I have no idea where. And that's when I started like dabbling in like modeling. I'm like, well, I'm new to California. The modeling, everyone's a fucking model out here. I might as well just try it. It'll be fun. Like, who cares? Like, not even thinking much of it because I've always wanted to be expressed. And so I booked my first modeling shoot. It was my first full nude shoot. And I've never felt more holy and pure in my entire life. And as I took off my clothes, I remember thinking to myself, I was always meant to take my clothes off. It felt like home. And the photos came back so beautifully that when I posted them on social media, they were like wildfire. And I started getting bookings from photographers from everywhere. Like I was booked 3 times a week forever doing shoots. I realized I was onto something here. My desire to be sexual wasn't random, it was part of my destiny. And so I booked all these shoots that had all these photos, and you can't post most of them to social media. And then that's when I learned about OnlyFans. And I was like, oh snap, I get a place to like post my sexy photos and make some money while at it. Fuck yes, like, this is a dream come true. And so I started posting them online on OnlyFans and just, like, feel what it feels like to put my stuff out there for the world to see and make some money while at it, and I freaking loved it. So now I've been doing it for almost 3 years. I make a lot of money in my OnlyFans, and I feel like I'm home. And in many ways, I still feel like a pastor, just with less clothes on. I take off my clothes to serve the people instead of keep the clothes on to serve the people. And it's amazing.
I can't help but have to ask this question because I think it's incredibly important. Because there are a handful of people who I know listening this are going to judge. They're going to cast judgment. They're going to throw stones, and they're going to say, oh, this is obviously just unhealed trauma for this woman, and she has a ton of problems she needs to work through. What I want to ask this in a very concise way.
Mhm.
When you live your life on your terms, how does it make you feel?
Oh my gosh. I'm like $1,000,000. Happy, at peace, aligned, a person of integrity, because my insides now match my outsides. I'm not trying to be something but feel something differently. Um, Joyful. I've never felt happier, healthier. I've never been wealthy. I've never felt closer to God than in the work that I do, because I'm literally peeling off all the layers. It is just me butt naked before the divine. And you have to make peace with that before you do what I do online. If you want to heal all your childhood trauma, you should start an OnlyFans. All this stuff, and be public about it. Like, what do you do when your family finds out? What do you do when your friends find out? What do you do when your kids find out? Like, you want to heal your shit? Start an OnlyFans. You don't want to heal your shit and just cast judgment? Don't start an OnlyFans and judge people who do. Like, starting this account is like the greatest transformation I forced myself to go through. And I think that's part of why it's so successful is I have such clean energy around it. I'm so authentic. I feel so free that my fans eat it up, because you don't get that everywhere. There's a lot of people who do it from brokenness or trauma. So where do you go to find a place where it's born from fullness and pureness and authenticity? It's not very common. Thankfully, it's becoming more common. And I help coach people and support women who start OnlyFans. I want them to build it from a place of wholeness. But it's why I love it. It's why I've been doing it so long. And it's why I have such loyal fans and why I make so much money. It is a breath of fresh air for people who come to that space.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I that's a quotable. And I think about this every single day where it's like we live in a world that is so we live in a country specifically, especially if you live in the United States, where it's like sex is everywhere, but make sure you don't talk about it. but it's everywhere. Buy our product. Don't talk about it, but it's everywhere. Go look at the #1 Google results on planet Earth. It's everywhere, but don't talk about it. And like, it's a part of our innate being as humans. And I think that the greatest sense of freedom is self-expression in whatever way you deem is best suited for you. And if it's not for you, that's okay, right? But to cast judgment against things you don't understand is the ultimate fixed mindset. And
Yeah.
whereas I look at the world through this scope of allow people the space to be themselves, and you will see the truth of who they are. And in that, what happens is you'll get a reflection about who you are, because if someone's truth makes you uncomfortable, you probably need to ask yourself some hard questions. And my hope is that this conversation, that what people will take away is just understanding the reality that this is up to you. There's no right or wrong. There's no this or that. It's just simply, who do you want to be? And are you willing to move through the fear to be that person? Because if you are, it's really fucking beautiful what happens on the other side. And that's not about necessarily entrepreneurship or sex or any of those. It's just, can you honor your truth and get to that place where when you look in the mirror, you're okay with the reflection on the other side? And that to me is healing. That to me is what it means to be the hero of your own story. Nikole, my friend, this conversation has been incredible. Before I ask you my last question, where can everyone find you?
Thank you for this conversation. It's been incredible, Michael. I'm just like still floored and happy and tickled. You can find me on all the social medias. You can go to NikoleMitchell.com to find my social media, to find my programs, to learn more about me. I'm the most active on Instagram and Facebook, and I would love for you guys to come say hi.
Brilliant. Of course, we'll put the links in the show notes. My last question for you, my friend. What does it mean to you to be unbroken?
I love this. I think it's for me to realize I was never broken in the first place. I've always been whole. Returning to my wholeness changed everything. So I realized there was nothing to fix. There were just things to heal. And once I returned to my wholeness and worthiness, the world is yours. Anything is possible.
Brilliantly said, my friend. Thank you so much for being here. Unbroken Nation, thank you so much for listening. Please like, subscribe, comment, share, tell a friend. And until next time, my friends, be unbroken. I'll see ya. Hey, Unbroken Nation, we'll be right back to the show, but I wanted to let you know that you can grab a copy of my first book, Think Unbroken, Understanding and Overcoming Childhood Trauma, for free. If you go to book.thinkunbroken.com, you can download the PDF ebook version of the book and get everything that I know about the baseline of healing trauma for free, downloaded to your email right now. Just go to book.thinkunbroken.com to download your copy of Think Unbroken, Understanding and Overcoming Childhood Trauma for a PDF for your phone. Again, that is book.thinkunbroken.com. Thank you so much for listening to Think Unbroken. Please share this episode with someone who could use it and help us move forward in our mission of ending generational trauma in our lifetime. And if you would, please take 5 seconds to pop on iTunes or Spotify, hit that 5-star, leave a review, and you can also reach out to us on social at Michael Unbroken or at Think Unbroken. And of course, you can check out our YouTube channel at Think Unbroken. Thank you for being a part of Unbroken Nation, my friends. And until next time, be unbroken.